Welcome to this 30-minute online workshop, Academic Drawing in Your Thesis Writing Week. My name is Anne and I hopefully will be showing you in 30 minutes the basics of visualization and drawing and how you can use it to help your thesis onto a new level. Let's get started. So I am an illustrator myself. I do illustrations for businesses and organizations and I help them to communicate their message in a more visual way. You can think of things such as visual note-taking, where I am at an event and doing notes that are visual, because visual is always better for people to read. It's easier to look at visuals than to take in a whole bunch of text. But what I also do is I take reports that are very boring and very long, and I do visualizations of the reports. And hopefully I will be able to give you a few tips and tricks on how to use visuals in your thesis. So these could be things such as little visualizations throughout your thesis that enhance the message that you're trying to tell. I would also like to dig a little deeper into your thesis and what it's all about. Hopefully by drawing out what your idea of your thesis is, what the begin, the middle and the end of it is, we can see if there's a logical way of doing it, and maybe you can improve a little bit by actually seeing the whole in one image. So let's get started. So what actually is academic drawing? Well, academic drawing is our own translation of the Dutch word zakelijk tekenen. It's not an official term, but I guess if you would ask people, some of the things that they could tell you what it could be is taking notes with illustrations, like what I just told you what I do. Supporting a conversation with visuals, or maybe reviving your childhood passions while actually being an adult. So these are not wrong or right answers. I would say all of the above is correct, because it's not an official term, and what it's all about is that you draw in order to communicate. So these are some examples of academic drawing that I'd like to show you. These are absolutely two of my favorite drawers in the world. Kelvy Bird is a very, very structural drawer. So she listens to a story, she makes up her own structure of what's going on in the story, and she just puts it together in a very artistic way. But it's honestly a lot of words and a lot of structuring, not necessarily a lot of drawing. And I hope that this gives you a little bit of confidence, because you don't actually have to be an artist to be able to draw in an academic way. On the left, we see Heather Martinez, and she is the queen of lettering. She also did this kind of visual note, and it does have some little drawings, but it's also a lot about text, and it shows you that you can deal with text in a very visual way as well. It has bigger and more bold text, and it's more it kind of pops onto the screen right away. It's the first thing that your eyes are being drawn towards. And then there's also some lighter colors that are a bit more on the background. So you can play around with words as well and how to use those. So why do you need academic drawing in your life? Well, for me, very personal, it's so obvious to me that whenever I'm a participant in, for instance, a workshop like this one, or a different kind of workshop or lecture or whatever, it really helps me to understand everything that's being said a whole lot better when I'm drawing it. Because if you push yourself to drawing it, it pushes you to be precise and concrete, because it's hard to stay abstract when you're visualizing things. So if you're drawing, you have to make a kind of an interpretation of what's being said. And it really helps you to grasp that whole whatever it is that is being said. When you've made a drawing, there will probably be an audience to present it to. And for people, it's so much easier to read through a drawing of some sort than to go through lines and lines and lines of text. It's actually like the human eye is more meant to be focusing on visualizations than on words. Especially if you're using visualizations of people and faces, it really appeals to people a lot more than text. And then if I'm looking at my own job, I have a client that I draw for, and usually they like the illustrations that I do, but then they take the illustrations and they also want to spread it to the other teammates that they have or to their own customers. So it's not just like your primary audience that you're reaching, but there's a second line of people that you're reaching through your visualizations. So obviously, when I'm doing a training such as this one, I encounter a lot of people that don't feel very confident about their drawing. And then there's always this moment where I say, oh, you shouldn't worry about that. Everyone can draw. But honestly, there's always this one person that says, yeah, everyone can draw except for me. I'm the one that can't draw. In order to kind of, I don't know, delete all of that except for me kind of lack of confidence, I have a little exercise for you. I would like you to draw something and I will give you 30 seconds to do that. And since we are in Holland, there's a lot of bikes on the road everywhere. So I'm sure you'll be able to recreate something that looks like a bike in 30 seconds. And I have my timer here. So when I say go, you go. And yeah, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Go. And stop. That was it. Your time is up. That was 30 seconds. I would love to see what your bike looks like. Usually when I do this in a training, it just comes to mind to people that we see bikes on a daily basis, maybe even on an hourly basis. But how on earth do you recreate that frame? And where does everything go, right? It's actually quite hard. And I felt the same way. The first year of being an illustrator, I feared the moment that I would have to draw a bike live in front of an audience. So, well, eventually I came up with this, this way of drawing a bike. And it goes something like this. It's called the M bike. And it's called that way because you start with the letter M, or kind of like a letter M. And this is the frame, because I found out that that was the hardest thing for me to draw. And with the frame, you can easily attach the other parts, such as the wheels, which are, well, quite easy shapes, obviously. And then we have this thing here. Don't know what that's called, that's okay. Where you sit on, and the steer. And that is it. I have created, well, it's probably not the technically correct bike, but it's very, very recognizable. So every time that I'm doing a bike, it goes like this. And now that you've noticed, you probably are able to do this in, well, let's say 15 seconds. And go. And your time is up. I'm not sure what your bike looks like, but maybe it's improved, maybe it hasn't. Now that you've done this 2 times, I think we can even do it in less than 15 seconds. And I will draw with you, just so you can see that I'm not, like, I can do this as well. I think you can do it as well. Let's say 5 seconds. I'm gonna press start and then let's just see what happens. All right, let's go. Well, that's a bit more of a wonky bike, but it's definitely still a bike, right? So this is where I see that everyone can draw. Now you can do this with a whole lot of things for practice. You can draw a house, for instance, in 30, 15 and 5 seconds. You can draw a car, a cup of coffee, I don't know, a dartboard maybe. Just the simple things to kind of build up your confidence. So if by now you're not feeling confident yet, try that, and also do not consider what you're making right now art. I won't be teaching you how to make gorgeous drawings of whatever. Consider it something functional. It's about the message that you're sending. It should help you to, well, for this case, it should help you to explain your thesis even better. It should support your text, and maybe it can, one day replace your text, but let's just start with the support. It's functional and yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. So now that we've done our warming up, I think it's time to get started with like the basics of drawing. So grab your marker once again, and I would love to show you a few tips that I really like to use. So if you start off with the most basic shapes, such as these triangle, rectangular shape, and a round, something that I always tell people is that you should really pay attention on closing those shapes. It doesn't matter what shape you're making, but it's easy to show you in this way. If you close your shapes instead of leaving them as sketchy as they were, might take a little more time, talking about a second or so extra. It just gives it that feeling of a more finished look. I find that, at least. I'm definitely not saying that it can't be nice if it's sketchy, but this is my way of working. And yeah, some of these tips really help for me, so I hope they work for you as well. Then these materials that I'm using, I use Neuland markers because I love them. They don't really go through the paper at all. So these are two papers, that's not really fair. They don't go through it, they don't bleed through it, so I love that about them. You have all these fun little colors, and if I start coloring it in, they won't leak into each other. You know, sometimes the lighter colors especially can have that, and these won't do that if you're using the right colors. So this green is just as green as it should be, and it's not leaking into each other. Just whatever you're using, make sure that you are aware of what you're using. So if I'm using just a plain black color like the one I am having over here, now you can see that these have different thicknesses. All of these markers are very different, and I can use them in various ways, but I can make very conscious choices of how much I want to exaggerate something. So if I'm going into something that's a bit more of a detail, something that doesn't have to pop out of your paper right away, it's probably more something for this little guy over here. While if I'm doing like a title or something that's really important for the thing that I want to express, I could use this really big fat marker. And everything in between goes with this one, for example. You could also, for instance, use a gray marker instead of a black one. So if I were to make a hexagon shape, for example, maybe it wasn't as important as the other ones, and I would do it in gray. That could be a way of making something go a little more into the background instead of the foreground, which could be a conscious choice if you don't want it to stand out as much as the other things. And then maybe I'm also doing, I don't know, what's another interesting shape, like a true rectangle. Maybe this one shouldn't be too much on the foreground as well. And I can do these dotted lines, and they will be a lot less exaggerated than this whole solid block of color. So there's a whole bunch of ways of trying out different thicknesses and colors. Just be aware of what you're choosing and why you're choosing it. So these are a few examples of things that I made. So a typical example of my style, it's very simple, but it does have these connected shapes. So whenever you see a shape that's not connected to another side, it's a conscious decision. It's something that I wanted to do, and that's because I find it very important for the look that I want to give my products. I want to move on to a few basic rules of drawing that let you draw everything that you need to draw. So they have this thing, it's called the visual alphabet, and I don't know if you've heard of it before, but they say that any shape that exists in the world can be made through using these simple alphabetic elements, these simple shapes that anyone can draw. I'm sure you can draw those, and just combine them, blow them up, make them bigger, make them smaller, turn them around, and then you can make any shape you want. Now, I'm not sure if this is the truth, but I think that if you want to draw, you should always keep it as simple as possible. It not only saves you time, but it's also very easy to read, so you won't be distracted by one thing or another. Secondly, text is okay. For instance, if I am drawing a coffee cup, I would do something like this. Watch me use all those simple alphabet parts for this. So a cup of coffee would be probably something like this, maybe a few of these wiggly lines on top of it to show there's like steam coming off or whatever, and that would be great. But since I'm working in black and white, if I'm doing this, suddenly it's a cup of tea. Now, if I'm not putting tea on it, but I'm saying hot cocoa, then it's that. So just by adding some words, you only have to remember one drawing, and suddenly it became like 3 or 4 or 5 drawings in one. Then lastly, what I wanted to talk about is a visual vocabulary. This is something like an encyclopedia that you are making yourself that is filled with visuals. So it could be something like, I don't know, a little notebook that you keep where you put all of these great images in that you see throughout your day. And anytime that you need one of those images, you just kind of go through it until you find it. You can copy paste it. It could also be something like a folder on your computer that you use to gather all of the inspiring art that you found that day or in your lifetime. You can just use it as inspiration for whatever comes up next. So perhaps you already have the M bike that we just did. Maybe that could be in your visual vocabulary. This could also be in your head. Mine is in my head because, well, I've done it a few times now and I kind of know what's what, and it's just in my head. So anytime I need to draw something, I just kind of think really hard about what was the last time that I did that. Oh, right, it was like that. And it started off with the basic shapes of this and that. So it could also be in your head, but it's a really nice way of kind of keeping a database of all the things that you can draw or that you saw being drawn. And the easiest way to fill up your visual vocabulary is by looking at other people. So for instance, if you're looking at these drawings, these are all my drawings, but I would love for you to copy and paste them into your visual vocabulary because it's just really helpful. These are all very multi-purpose kind of visuals, icons even, that you can use in all sorts of different situations. So maybe you can pause the video right here and just start copying some of these drawings that you really like and see what happens if you copy them. Do they look the same or do they look a bit different? Does it help if they become a bit larger or if you stretch them out a bit? What makes the thing that is so recognizable about this so recognizable? Why isn't it recognizable if you do it differently? It's really good practice to just copy them and look at it in a critical way, like what makes this so recognizable for you? And obviously, for instance, if you have the hospital building that's on the right, it's a hospital building right now, but if you would replace the cross with the logo of the company that you're working at or whatever, you can make it into every building that you'd like. And it counts for a lot of these images, really. So play around with it, vary a little, and see which ones end up in your visual vocabulary. If you are not sure how to draw something, you can always look it up on Google. It doesn't mean that you're copying stuff. I mean, I will let you copy my stuff as well. But if you look things up in Google and then say, for example, if you want to draw a bike, then you do bike illustration. Make sure illustration is there because then you get like the basic lines of everything. And then as you're looking it up, you will probably see 100 drawn bikes come around, and you can pick those that appeal most to you and your style as well. And you can see which is the easiest to draw or whatever just suits you best. And I'm a really big fan of it because I think by looking at these different kinds of drawn out bikes, for instance, you can learn so much about what is exactly necessary to draw a bike that is functional. So please Google whatever it is that you have to draw, and then make sure that you just get the basic shapes. Use the visual alphabet if it helps you to simplify that shape even more. So right now what I want to do is that I want to do a little emotions drawing with you. So if you could just copy what I have on the slide right here, and I'm going to draw with you. I'm gonna do the first 9 on the left mostly. Just like that. And we're gonna draw these as well. If you haven't noticed yet, these are the eyebrows and these will be the mouths. So it's kind of like a table. We'll draw the little mouth. Everyone can have eyes, by the way, in the same way. But I draw the top ones with a happy mouth, and the middle ones with kind of a neutral mouth, I guess. And the bottom ones, they have a sad mouth. And then if we draw in the eyebrows, then we'll have not just happy faces on the top, we'll have different kinds. Well, this one isn't even happy anymore. This one is more like evil, laughing at me, while this one is very innocently laughing at me. So that's interesting. It makes a completely different emotion just by adding the eyebrows. And I feel like people are a very big part of what I'm drawing always, because they are so important in almost every situation. So the emotions that you want to have in your visual vocabulary should be quite a wide range. And I've given you 9 already. If you look at them, you can really see how they all feel so different. They also are looking in different directions, I see now. This one is just right on angry. It's not a pleasant look. It's a very negative, closed look. But these are a bit more, I don't know, maybe they're a bit surprised by something or innocent, and these are more aggressive kind of looking. I feel like the true intention of someone is actually in the eyebrows of someone. And I really feel that even though you're laughing, such as this one is, then still the eyebrows tell the true intention of some kind of angry, negative emotion that we don't really like. These are just 9 emotions, with the eyebrow perhaps or maybe not being the actual intention of the smiley faces. But obviously there's a whole spectrum of emotions that we haven't even gotten to yet. So what I'd like to advise you is take your WhatsApp emojis there, and you can just draw whatever is on there. So the kiss mouth, for instance, or what we haven't had either is like the sarcastic kind of eyebrow. Maybe someone's surprised, and then the eyebrows would definitely be like that. More surprised can be with this kind of sparkly visual effect. So anyway, these are a few different types of emotions, and you can just play around with this, do a whole lot that you saw somewhere or that you just made up. Then we also have people and stances of people, to be more precise. So you can also do these that I put on the screen right just now. And these can be stick figures, or I will do 3x3 as well. You can do more if you'd like, because I want to show you the same thing that I just showed you, but with the positioning of people. And now someone asked me when I did this exercise before, is if you do hands and arms and legs and feet, how do you do them? My answer would be, I don't know, you just try out what works best for your style. I usually do my arms just like sticks, and then the hands go a bit like that, just oval kind of roundish shapes. And these people can all have eyes as well. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give the top row all kind of an open arm kind of positioning of the body. It's open would be this, or just like all open arms. Oh, this lower arm is a bit short. Well, that's okay. That's too bad for that little person. Then the middle section is going to be neutral. Neutral could be like just hanging alongside the body or just like in front of you. Then the bottom row is going to be just straight close. What is close? For instance, if someone is upset, they will put their arms on their sides perhaps, or they will cross arms on top of each other. And the same as with the emotions, I will do like this counter thing where the left people can all have open feet and legs, open position, and the middle one can have like a neutral, where the legs go in the same direction, kind of. Oh, I didn't even do a stick figure here. That's okay. And then the right ones will have closed legs. Like, this is really, really close. No one actually stands like that in normal life. But this way you can see that where the hands of these people were all the same, the arms were the same, this makes a very big difference. So what I was telling you about the eyebrows just now and how they reveal the true intention of someone, that's also what is going on with the legs for me here. So if someone is doing a presentation and someone's taught them that you should always present with your arms like this and that, you can still see that they're nervous. If they have their legs like this, it shows, like, I can even do a little bit of an exaggeration. And that just makes the whole stance a little less convincing, you know? And then we have this, like, it's a very neutral person then perhaps. And this, when you have your arms just like in your sides and your legs are closed, it just feels like a negative vibe, like it's a don't come closer vibe. And it can be very practical to use these kinds of stances to help explain what you mean a bit more. So we've been talking about these smaller visual elements that you can put somewhere. Usually, if you want to explain something with a drawing, you are talking about the big picture of something. So you want to do a big drawing where there's multiple of these smaller icons involved, and maybe there's some text involved, maybe there's a big title of whatever it is that your drawing is about. We call that the big picture. And a big picture has a structure that you can think about before you are starting drawing right away. So you have a certain amount of space that you're working in, and I just took this rectangular shape because usually when I'm drawing on just paper that has a rectangular shape. Now the structure is the way, for instance, that your audience is going to read through the poster that you made or the visual that you made. Usually, if you have text, you start from the top left and you go to the bottom right corner. But it doesn't have to necessarily be that way in visuals. You can think of what is the thing that you're trying to say and choose a fitting theme for your structure to go with that. So, for example, if I'm doing a brainstorm and I'm visualizing a brainstorm, for example, I know that in a brainstorm there will be a lot of different ideas popping up and they're not very extensive. So I could choose the structure that is on the second row of the third picture. But maybe if I'm talking about how my company is going to make more profit and help more people, then I could choose the arrow that's going from the bottom left to the top right to visualize not only what needs to happen to get there, but also if you look at it from a distance, you can see this upright going motion that already tells you a little bit more about what this is going to be about. So just go ahead and make the easiest drawing of your structure. And make a few and then choose one that you think is best. And to help you with that, I have a few templates as well that are basically just structures, but a bit more visualized. So what I was telling you about, like the profit kind of arrow, that's the one on the top right that I just made a little bit more visually appealing by making the arrow really big. So you can still fill that in later with the smaller icons and text that you want to use. But then there is like this basic shape that is going to tell your audience, even if they're really far from they're standing really far from the picture, they can see what this is going to be about a little maybe. I could also imagine that if you are talking about some kind of subject that a lot of people have an opinion about, you could choose something such as in the middle row, the right one, the title, what it's about, and then all of the different reactions that are going around it. And maybe you can group the more negative and the positive reactions with each other, and you make this kind of, yeah, you can see how I'm fairly well trained in thinking in structures and templates that you can fill in. So lastly, I have this little assignment for you to bring it all together. And I thought, like, as you are writing your thesis, it could be nice not to just like make these little drawings and icons of the little things that you want to enhance, but to also draw out, literally draw out your thesis in this kind of structure that we were talking about, so that you can see the overview of what your thesis is about and how it's going in terms of how are you reading through it and does it make sense. Maybe your thesis is about something that has a current state and a future state. So you could do maybe something like this. This is your thesis. And then maybe you have like all these chapters. There's like an introduction to your thesis. And then there's this little current state introduction. You have a little icon that goes with that. And maybe you have a little chapter on what goes next just before we go to the future state. Maybe you're doing research on something that happened in 1950 and something like the current state in 2020, what's going on right now. And then you have this closing kind of paragraphs. I'm just asking you to draw it all out because this can give you so much sense of something. So the reading, how I'm going to read through it is like this. Woo, going through all of that. This is the way I'm reading. It's very, very easy and simple, and I love that as an audience. So I'm asking you to bring it all together and make a visualization of your thesis and see how it works for you if you want to do something different with it. And then if you don't really feel like doing something else with your thesis, I'm going to invite you to do the same, make this big poster kind of thing with a structure and everything, but don't make it on your thesis if you don't want to. Make it on how you make coffee. What kind of structure would go well with making coffee? What kind of process is that? It's maybe it's easier for you to do that if you feel kind of stuck on your thesis or you're just done with it for a second. If you are thinking about how to make coffee, you're actually thinking about what is that concept all about. So think of a way to visualize how to make coffee or what your thesis is all about. And that's your homework. And if you feel the need to, please share this with me because I absolutely love seeing everything that you made. If you have any more questions about the things that I'm telling you or just any questions about academic drawing at all, please send me an email on this email address and I would be delighted to answer all of your emails, questions, give you feedback on things if you'd like that. I would just really like to get in touch with you because obviously we haven't been interacting a whole lot this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it and I'm looking forward to seeing all your drawings. Good luck!